So you were the only defense witness that was allowed to testify in Tim's trial, is that correct?
Right, right. The basis of the defense that we argued was that at the very time that Tim was there at the scene, he called me first, and he said, he was frightened, he said, here's what I did, and will you help? And I said, absolutely no problem. Matter of fact, you know, we'll have the money within days in terms of being able to pay for the deposit for the leases, because I was aware about how much money that was, and I knew about what we needed, and I knew we could get it immediately. And actually we did within about 2 weeks, a little less actually. And then the BLM didn't allow Tim to pay for the leases. So the defense was, at the very time he did it, he had the money he had the money promised, which was exactly true, and we followed through immediately. We built the websites that asked for the funding. We got it in 10 days, and we had the money to pay for it. So that was the defense, and that didn't make any difference.
And do you feel like Tim was selectively prosecuted?
Well, yeah, I'm deeply concerned that a lot of our institutions are on the edge of losing credibility. In Tim's case, and legitimacy, because in Tim's case, he did enact the civil disobedience, but the leases were illegal. We had the funding so that we would have covered the issue even if it would have been temporary. And then he was found guilty. When you have that kind of situation with a kid who does something that's a very small act of resistance and something that's already illegal, compared to the Wall Street barons who take, you know, billions that we have to pay, and they end up, you know, with more and more money. It's selective prosecution, of course. I mean, it's insane prosecution. It makes no sense that somebody like Tim would have been prosecuted for this, given all the other things that are happening in the culture. It makes no sense.
So through your involvement with Tim's situation and his case, that led to you also being one of the founders of Peaceful Uprising. Can you tell me a little bit about how that came about?
Well, because of this, and Tim and I come from the same background at the Unitarian Church. I founded the environmental ministry there years ago, and we were working together on Post-Carbon Salt Lake, which is an organization that looks beyond the petroleum world we have today. So what Tim did was almost a natural thing, because we were planning the demonstration the night before at my house. I didn't go myself, but I knew most all of the people who were there. So after that, we together founded an organization that's Peaceful Uprising, which you can see at peacefuluprising.org. But we kicked that off the next month at the Unitarian Church with a number of us who got together as a fundraising again to help Tim. That's how Peaceful Uprising got going, and it's just snowballed since then in the last 2 years.
And what do you think the role is? We had mentioned that there was sometimes a somewhat of a generational difference in outlook and in awareness about the effectiveness of these type of movements. The baby boomers came from an era where that was very common. And what are the differences today, or similarities, between those movements of the past and this new one that you guys have started?
What I see is very troubling, and what I see is that young people just don't see the ability to make a difference. Very disillusioned. I mean, look at the number of people who vote. The response to one small idea of hope from Barack Obama dashed in the experience that we've seen in the last 2.5 years since he's become president. So there's not a sense out of the young today of being able to affect change or being able to have a role in making a difference. I came out of the protest against the Vietnam War. I was arrested when I was these guys' age, and I was on the line in terms of being drafted. So, and my generation has seen the civil rights movement and protest against the Vietnam War work, and the passage of the Clean Air and Clean Water Act after that. So we've seen a lot of good things happen in our lifetime. So I think one of the things we boomers need to do is to give our time and our resources and our support to these young people and things like Peaceful Uprising. And I think we have resources that these guys don't. We've seen things that they haven't seen. So I think it's our role, I definitely think it's my role, to be as supportive as I possibly can so that they can be enabled to do what they do. I also think it's absolutely necessary that those of us who operate in the nonprofit world and those of us who are part of what might be called the establishment understand that if change is going to happen, it's going to have to come from that area, because I believe young people see it's not going to happen in our government. It's not going to happen from the business community, and particularly when you're looking at the deadly, serious, lethal, looming catastrophe of global warming and climate catastrophe, which means we have to do something very different than what we're doing now, decrease our carbon dioxide emissions by 6% every year from now until 2050 to when we really release no carbon. I mean, when Tim talks about not having a livable future, that's very, very real. It's very real to me. So that we have to provide the resources and the financial and the human resources to support these young people when they go out and do protest.
And does that support, Ashley mentioned trying to create a bold approach, bold being the adjective. What does bold mean?
I think it means a number of things. First, I think as you see from Ashley, from Tim and myself, part of it is to understand that that conversations need to happen in our churches and our communities of meaning. So a lot of the way people look at action now is simply responding online, sending a $25 check, or even having an action in the streets. I think bold is to understand that we have to meet people where these kinds of questions of justice, morality, meaning happen. So it's going to take operating and working in our churches. Bold also means that we, the folks who understand how close we are to complete breakdown and catastrophe, stop being silent. Speak the truth. We have climate scientists saying it, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who know exactly the difficulty we're in, and they have large financial resources. A lot of our foundations, a lot of our environmental foundations know how near to the precipice of complete catastrophe we are. They need to persuade the rest of the society. Bold, in our case, is to ask them for lots of financial resources. Bold is to go in the streets and push back against the folks who are being indifferent, let's say our government, or resisting the fossil fuel interests. Corporations and government are in a world of their own and have a power all their own to keep the destruction going. That's got to be stopped. Bold means actually doing something. Bold means speaking the truth. Bold means not being silent in the face of what's happening. Bold means, I remember a definition of hell the minister Tom Goldsmith said, and hell is when the truth turns out to be as bad as you thought and you didn't do anything about it. That's the misery of hell, when the truth actually turns out to be what you thought it would be and you failed to act and do something about it.
You mentioned the churches and how that kind of a community feel can be very strong. But in the term climate justice or even environmental activism has somewhat of a taint in certain circles of an ideological rift in certain spiritual communities. How do you hope an organization like Peaceful Uprising would be able to address that?
Really glad you asked that question, because I think we take a very small look at justice. The entire, Judeo-Christian world speaks of worth and dignity of every human being and justice. That's their heart's desire. That's what all of our religions talk about. And the truth is that the vast majority of the humans in the world live on almost nothing, have water shortage, are hungry, starving. Climate justice is that everybody on the planet, everybody who's affected by this, because the poor and the needy and the rest of the world are the ones who are going to suffer first because of climate chaos. They're already suffering now as we have less food because of global warming. So climate justice means taking everyone into consideration. That's why it's not a Republican, Democratic, it's a universal call for justice. Because if we don't have every one of us on board, then we're not going to make it. And the reason is, no matter what we do, the United States and China and Europe and India, no matter what we do, if we stop all of the carbon emissions and the poor take the development route by burning coal and gasoline, then we won't make it. There's that little carbon budget available. So we have to bring everybody along, or we don't make it. The poor actually hold a knife to our throat. If we don't bring them, we're toast.
And are you an optimist?
No, I can't say I'm optimistic. I'm tremendously motivated. But the science, the scientists, the people who look at this every day, they know we have a very short time to change dramatically. So I'm not an optimist or a pessimist. I just believe we have to do everything we can. And if the truth were known by every human being, which I don't think it is, then I think we would do what's necessary. So the job is to spread the truth.
Just working with Peaceful Uprising and these young members in Tim's case and kind of seeing his stand, does that give you more hope?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you heard it from Ashley, you hear it from Tim. All of us were very inspired by at least some example of somebody standing up and saying, hell no, I'm not going to take it anymore. That really liberates a lot of people. I just see it in hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands when Tim talks. Yeah, we need that example. We need that something to look at to get out of our own lethargy, to think that there's some chance we can make a difference. And so, yes, that's very, very thrilling. I don't know if that's optimistic. It's encouraging and it's thrilling.
Well, will there be more people willing to take a similar kind of stand?
I think we're all committed to that. To some degree, we believe it's been too much focused on Tim. And the movement is a lot more people than Tim. And so I think the people who are doing things that are not necessarily getting the visibility that they should. For example, there was a group that occupied the Kentucky governor's office around Valentine's Day, and that wasn't given media coverage. So I think as more and more people take a stand, particularly when it comes to the near catastrophe of global warming, then I think, yes, yeah, that more people will. If it's visible, people will. I'd just add one more thing that I think is critical. And I know people look at this and they watch it from the sidelines, and I know from the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that I talk to, there's a tremendous amount of despair. People have trouble looking at the information because they don't think they can make a difference. And I think that it's important that we acknowledge that our children are not going to make it unless we actually do something, that we actually get involved, that we actually take a stand. And I think once that happens, that we have to bring everybody along, all the humans on the planet, and that our children are literally at stake here, then if we can open up to the information, which people need to do, then acting has to happen. One of my closest friends in this movement is a person who started the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment. And he stood up in the beginning of that. I was one of the first people there, and he said, you know, this is for my granddaughter. I'm not going to stop. And this guy works all the time because he understands that his little, beautiful granddaughter is literally at stake in this. And that's your daughter.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he said.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, when Brian stands up and talks about that, it's like, you know, that just takes my breath away because it's so true.
That's what's on my mind.
Yeah. That's why I do this.